Okay, hello and welcome to the channel. This video is going to be quite different to all of my other videos, which are mostly just tutorials and live streams to do with Blender, as well as Substance and Unreal where possible. This video is going to be just looking through what is now actually apparently over 10 years of me doing 3D artwork. That's not exactly a totally true statement because I wasn't doing it very much to begin with, but I downloaded the software and uploaded a YouTube video, which if we scroll right back into my history, we can see that the video there was uploaded on December 13th, 2011. So that makes it, over 10 years that I've had Blender available to me, that I've known about it, and that I've been using it semi-frequently. And for quite a while there, I was using it a lot. For reference, this is the end of 2011. Some games that came out that year or the year after were like Skyrim, I think probably GTA 5, Portal 2, probably Batman Arkham City, I think, and games like that. And they weren't actually using PBR at the time, and I didn't even really know that games was an option for me at the time. I always thought it was going to be animation that I was going to do, and then sort of below the animation thing, when I was going to sign up for uni, I saw that it was games as well, so I decided to apply to that too. And yeah, this whole video is going to be just full of little things like that. It could be some callbacks for anyone that is familiar with all the software of the last 10 years, or it could just be educational for anyone that isn't familiar with all the software changes in the last 10 years and kind of just wants to see what's going on. But obviously it's geared around my own work and all these uploads that I've made, so looking through it, we'll just see where I'm at and also compare it to where someone else could be at if they are getting started right now. How different would it be? So there's going to be a lot of name dropping of different things, but to start off, I think I was probably following some CG Cookie tutorials because they were still about around then, as well as Andrew Price, who was still making tutorials back then as well. And I made this snowman scene, so that does line up pretty well with a December time, sort of getting started in working 3D, and that was my first render in all its glory. I didn't know anything about polygon counts. I think that I was using like the sculpting mode in Blender to make sort of the bumps on here. And then for some reason I didn't even subdivide or bevel these presents. I just kind of, I just left them quite sharp and rounded them with the smooth shading. And then, and yeah, I remember my computer crashing a lot as I made this. And yeah, moving on from there, I actually quite like this one. This is after following quite a lot of tutorials. I was itching to make my own thing, and there was this sort of style that was quite popular at the time, which is making just little renders like this. I think the subreddit was particularly annoyed at anyone that would share work like this because people had seen it so often. But I did enjoy it, and I carried on doing it. And really, I guess we've got to go back to the YouTube to see an actual timeline here. I really, with the idea of animation and characters and stuff for animation, because that's sort of the highlight, I never really considered environment work that much to begin with. I did get a a character made, which actually I think was pretty good. I can't remember whose tutorial series it was. I think it was just CG Cookie again. And I followed and made a character and rigged them. So that was pretty good. Clearly avoided the face here by putting a face mask on them and glasses. And I thought it was pretty cool. It's a little bit based on the Major from Ghost in the Shell, Kusanagi, and I pretty much tried to follow that thread just to kind of keep an idea of how much better at working I was getting. So all of these videos in this block here were made within that 1 year in 2012, which was my 12th year at school, 12th/13th year at school, working in my A-levels at that point. It's very easy to remember because 2012, 12th year at school, and so that is A-level time for people in the UK. And pretty much my art teacher didn't know anything about 3D, so I had the freedom to just make whatever, and then they were always amazed. And I was getting really good grades for it as well. But of course, that probably pushed me on to actually doing it more. So it's not a bad system. So yeah, we've got all this animation and rigging. I thought all this stuff was pretty good. Most of these views just absolutely fell off once Blender 2.7 and stuff came out, because I always labeled them as Blender 2.6. I think I might have started off even using just before that, I'm not quite sure. And yeah, I mean, we can really take a look at what it looked like potentially in this speed art here. So I created the blue spirit mask from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we can't see what that looks like at all because it's too low resolution. This is a little bit better, 480p. And yeah, this is what Blender used to look like, and it's really dated, but apart from just tinting the colours different because of how computers are these days, dark modes are preferred and all this sort of stuff, apart from tinting the colours, I don't think it's massively different. I mean, I'm not saying that to put down all the work that they've done since 2.6, because it's amazing amount of work that they've done, but the way that they've organised it, if I do open it here, it's kind of, you know, it's been arranged into nicer symbols here and there. This menu kind of exists and it can disappear, and then it's all arranged into like tabs along the top, which actually makes it look very similar. The scenes used to be a drop-down menu and all this sort of stuff. So it makes it feel similar. Like at the very least, all the functionality is definitely there in this one. It's just maybe not as obvious and not as well presented. So that's what it used to look like, and I was pretty much using that for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure I had a video here somewhere that was oh yeah, this is what YouTube used to look like. So while I was uploading these, this is what it's like. Yeah, this is all what YouTube used to look like at the time, which I thought was interesting to see. Skip through. It's not, well, it is pretty different. Before Google bought them, all this sort of stuff. And we can see Blender Cookie here. And yes, that's what my YouTube channel used to look like. And I was really showing off some of these different things here. So we're still continuing with this character. This portfolio video here is what got me into university. So it was all self-taught at that point. Definitely something, all this sort of stuff here that I did, you could probably learn most of it within like a week just by really hammering through YouTube at the minute. Because at the time I could probably do the same thing, but it was all on like cgcookie.com, or I think even Andrew Price had a blenderguru.com, which he probably still does. But it really wasn't like YouTube was the focus for them. It was always backed up on different websites and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, this is the video that I used to get me into university. And thankfully that worked, because that's really when I can then get into the real stuff. So just before getting to university though, I did make an environment, which we can probably see a render here to make it a little bit better. But just before getting into uni, I made this environment right here. I made that stylized render over here. without a tutorial. I just sort of made that, and it was semi-popular. It got quite a big response compared to what I previously made. And then, yeah, and I pretty much made that one before uni as well, or just at the start of uni. And I managed to loop back around and actually make a face for the same character. So that turned out pretty good, I think. And it all fed into my work later on, which pretty much we're getting into my university territory now, which is pretty much just after, yeah, like just after this video here. So it says Sheffield Hallam, which was the university that I went to. And that was the first video, but then really that was followed up by these renders that we did to show what we could do. So really not very much teaching. This is sort of the first semester. And it was like, just do this. It doesn't have to be real time. Just do a 3D thing and show us what you can do. So I made, well, we had to make a bedroom. And that was my one. Complete with a Legend of Korra teapot, some posters of some of the work that I did previously, and I believe we had to have a teddy bear in there as well. And yeah, it was like, I think I just placed it down. I remember just placing it, and I placed it by its head touching, and the whole thing's just floating, so that's not great. But I guess I didn't get close enough to see that. And yeah, really, like that level of quality then really shot straight down. So that was before I started learning, especially before I started learning 3D artwork for games. And again, games back then, even though they were amazing, things like Skyrim, you can take a look at them and they do have very low polygon counts. It was still very much low polygon counts, and I'm pretty sure it was on the brink of PBR rendering, because I think Batman Arkham Knight came out in 2015, I want to say, and they really heavily advertised that as physically based rendering. And I was watching an Insider on the YouTube channel Insider. They do a covering of Pixar and all the new technologies that came out. And I think it was one of the Cars movie that they credit PBR rendering. They credit that to PBR rendering in offline rendering. So I'm not sure when that first came, how quickly that traveled down to real-time rendering. Either way, I went from, again, making things like this bedroom and this sort of cave situation here, which I thought, you know, looked pretty good. There it is. You know, it's not super complex, but I think it looks all right. You know, straight to getting assigned some low poly assets, which is, you know, I think the modeling's still fine. We had a really strict polygon count, and then that's what the texturing looked like. So that's the diffuse. So that's all of them together, and yeah, it's not great. And that's because I was learning a new thing. So I went from learning just my own stuff and making stuff that I was interested in, to being told I need to make this thing and I need to make it this way. And that transition clearly hit me pretty hard, because the things that I made were not great. And I hadn't done much texturing before, but this was all Photoshop at the time. So Substance and stuff probably existed, but they weren't widely adopted, and especially not adopted by universities as something that you need to learn. So it was all very much Photoshop. And we did have access to ZBrush for some character stuff, which obviously I was more familiar with. So let's have a little look at that. So there was a system where you can download characters from Dota, and then we just had to make new accessories for them. So if I just skip forward to the full render for that, oh, there it is right there. So the accessories that I made were this sort of cape thing, maybe the shoulder pads, the bow. I made this whole floor thing, and it's all hand painted textures in Photoshop. So it's not great, and this was also Marmoset tool bag as well. And I made the hair, different hairstyle, the hood. You know, it was okay, but it wasn't. And it was the first year. It was definitely a major improvement on those things that I'd made just earlier. And meanwhile, I did upload this speed art of a house, which has now got 124,000 views. So I immediately saw that I was getting views and tried to capitalize on it with what I think is a much better piece of artwork and a much better tutorial series for it. But it only obviously got like 2k views, so I don't know what hit that one off in terms of how good it is. Probably just these thumbnails aren't very good or whatever. But actually going through and showing the full step here was a much higher quality asset that I was inspired to make based on just having something that performed quite well on YouTube. So that's kind of how I was pushing myself forward as well, which is probably worth mentioning. Uploading these YouTube videos, regardless of how many views they get, I get to look back on them, which clearly you can see all the red lines. I do look back on them just to kind of learn from them, especially when they're tutorials and I forget what actually I did to do them. So yeah, a little bit of, like, I think it's good, like, from a personal standpoint, to upload these videos. You're helping other people a little bit, regardless of who watches. And I get to see, like, oh, I was all right at doing hand-painted textures back then. It's something that I've not done properly in a long time. So that's just kind of, you know, interesting to see that I could have improved on that if I'd done it more. So yeah, we got some of my first, and again, you constantly. So I'd leveled up to the point of making something really cool here. Like, look at that, like, you know, the level I was at, and we're talking 2014. I think that is such an improvement on something that I'd made earlier. But that was still in Blender. It was something that I was focusing on. We had just been doing stylized textures for characters, and it all kind of came together to make one piece right here. But then as soon as I move over to something that isn't in that sort of realm that I already understand, such as Unreal Engine, then immediately I start making things a lot like this, because the amount of things that I'm learning, you know, my quality just, again, takes this massive dip, and I just have to, you know, make what I can. And in this case, this was my, like, final result for my first in-game scene that we made. We were all working together on this sort of thing, or rather, we were all working at the same time, and we were able to all sort of look at what each other were doing, which is a really good thing about working at a university. And so I was able to look at this and then just be like, you know, this is what it could be. If I was any good at modeling things, it would look different. So yeah, so 2014, December. And this is when I was really just getting started as well. We're talking about 3 years of me doing 3D stuff. And this is where I started still. This is when I went to university, and this is our, like, end of our first year, potentially the start of our, yeah, probably end of our first year, and or in the middle of our first year at least. And yeah, it's and that's all I could make with it, you know. And so the quality, again, just, you can't think about it in terms of it being something that you know, if you're good at one thing, you can't just immediately be good at the next thing. It's definitely not all the same, is what I'm trying to say. More tutorials. I start making some better tutorials for sure. I'm still keeping the speed art up as well in my spare time. And actually, well, at first, we then in second year got around to actually doing some PBR texturing. It's still called a microsurface rather than roughness. I guess it's all pretty much the same, but I think I did a pretty good job at rendering this crate. I actually got top marks for making this asset because my rendering was really good on it, like the texturing. I understood pretty well, apart from my metalness map had grey values, which I was marked down for, But now that I've been doing it for a long time, like grey values aren't that bad, especially for the situations that I was using it in, which were areas that were worn but not fully worn down from the paint. And that's just how it is. So I got pretty good results for that. Like my unwrapping was really good, all done by hand, because that's just what I had access to. The modelling seems pretty good, the baking and all that. And then immediately I swapped over to make this next item here. Like that was the next part of the module. And my rendering went downhill. My modelling actually improved, but my texturing is not very good, and I actually got pretty medium to low marks for this, because it was just sort of a downgrade on what I'd done previously, and it was an absolute nightmare to make as well. So crazy time, but this is like the tipping point, I think, when I was like, once I was able to make props that were at least modelled pretty well. That was sort of the tipping point where then we well, I went away and did a speed art here. I just skip forward for the render at the end. So I made a speed art here. I think like the placement of assets there and the modeling again is just another step up. I never ended up texturing this, but it was a very fun thing to do. And yeah, that takes me right just before the real tipping point, which was pretty much the end of our second year at university. So we're 2 years in at this point at university, where I've been doing it full time, 3D artwork, and this is like a group project. So pretty much everything that you see is made by different people, although us environment art guys did do quite a bit. Like this was all made by a mate of mine. At the front here, all this cave, the train was made by a different guy, and then I sort of made this roofing stuff here. Another guy did the foliage, and it was a really good opportunity for us all to be working together. And then a different guy made the platform, and a lot of the grass and stuff. So yeah, I think my texturing here was pretty good as well. Definitely I'm more improved, although maybe just a bit too rusty in here and there. But overall, this was a modular kit for the roof as well, first sort of thing that I'd done like that. And we also placed all the stuff, and then my mate had this hallway to himself to make as well. And then actually a guy that I work with right now cycled round, and he had made the front area here. He'd also done some of the lighting, I think, and he is a lighting artist now, so makes sense. And yeah, it all looks pretty good, apart, for our first real job inside Unreal. And like I say, past that point, I mean, if I'm looking at this, that pretty much takes us to there, and past that is really the tipping point. So this is where I'm in my third year now of uni, I think, and that's technically meant to be your final year, but I did do a master's degree, so I did 4 years. And at this point, I released something that I still think is really good. This actually got me my job that I currently have. Apparently, this is the piece that they like the most, even though I'd done more work after that. And so, what we're looking at is just some, it's the ice station from Time Splitters 2. We had to remake a level, and I think immediately, like, this is when I had learned Substance Designer a little bit as well. Let's have a little look. And Substance Painter was out and stuff. Yeah, I did a little module right here, which actually, no, so I hadn't really learned that yet. I was learning it in parallel, because I've released that video after this video. So I was learning Substance Designer and definitely Substance Painter. So a lot of these materials were all created by those softwares. And it's again another modular kit. I think it's a really good upgrade on the original map. And yeah, I think that it just looks pretty good. And I was doing some good stuff with it. so that was my first like solo project in Unreal 5 that I'd actually spent time in artwork on, and I wasn't just learning Unreal itself, which I was for that other project I showed earlier. And then at the same time, I also improved upon this very similar character to what I'd already made, you know, intending to be someone that was basically the same sort of idea that I had before. I've added this sort of mystical element to it. And I think, you know, the face isn't great, but this is also a game-ready character as well. So, so that's just kind of how that is. I've not really done a character since then. I did try a little bit, but I think it's really not that bad. I think that it's I could have carried on again and just probably been all right at that if I just, as that was my first attempt making a proper character like this, unlike the ones that I'd shown previously. And this is inside university time, so like my knowledge has been and my time was just way up. Like I appreciate that it's not really my first attempt if you consider the Drow Ranger, as well as all this sort of stuff that I'd done when I was actually picking the software up. But it felt like, it definitely feels like it was after all this sort of environment stuff, and yeah, so I thought it went pretty well. So yeah, then I picked up Substance Designer, and I found that, you know, 3 months or whatever of working on Substances alongside other projects was enough time to create all these different variations. Some of them are dynamic. And to be fair, I think I did alright at that, which is something that I would continue. But for a moment there, I also went back to do some stylized things as well. So at this point, I'd sort of been looking at reference of Rime that I don't think was out yet. It hadn't been released. As well as other games. I think The Witness hadn't been released yet either, or at least I hadn't bought it. And so I was looking at them as reference, just sort of the trailers and stuff. And now The Witness is one of my favourite games. Rime is an amazing game. And that's just sort of what happened with that. And this actually was a good marker point, because when I look back here on my ArtStation, it was once I'd released that, it got picked up by 8 level when 8 level was, well, 8 level looked like this, and it was back how it was then, and that was just really cool. Interesting there that I'd used, well, I'm going to scroll down the article, I might as well. Interesting that I had basically created light probes without realizing it. There's actually quite a few things that I realized here that, for example, the water and the reflections and stuff, I input a noise texture into the UV space and offset it. And I didn't see a tutorial that said how to do that. It just happened to be one of those things that, like a Dunning-Kruger effect, where you think like, wow, like I've just discovered something, like everyone needs to know about this. And then obviously, like, you know, a week later or whatever, I found that everyone in the world pretty much knew about warping UV space. But I kind of discovered it and I thought it was really cool. And then I didn't for a long time realize, well, I mean, and it's kind of, it looks kind of shoddy from right now because it's but at the time I didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of was being told to do this, and this is what I did genuinely. So I put these green spheres and red spheres and stuff all over the place because the water wasn't reflecting any global illumination. So it's kind of like using a volumetric light map, you know? And then that caused the light to reflect off them, and I just deleted them afterwards or hid them. And yeah, I feel like that was kind of just one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, cool. And then it turned out that it was a real thing that some smart programmers had implemented that I could have used. So that's how that is. And that's what I've put there at the start, but that's just because they're bunched in that way. And yeah, like that was my third year of uni, so most people would finish at that point. But we carried on for wait, it was, oh yeah, I think I made this at the same time as well. So yeah, like the modeling and the texturing and everything had gone way up at that point, thanks to Substance Designer really and Substance Painter. You know, this was just so much easier. Um, so that's just kind of how that is, and I think it was pretty good. It just builds upon, and in the same way that I was trying to do like that female character again, I also tried to make this gun sort of reminiscent of the one I made in my first year, just to kind of be like, how could I make this? I made this in my first year, and then I made this in my third year, so like 2 years later. Um, and so I thought it was interesting to kind of see that. Uh, and then I was inspired by Gravity Rush and other things to make this my final year project in my fourth year. And this just really builds upon everything I still use today. So it took me 4 years of uni to get to that point, with also 1 to 2 years of just doing noodling in my personal time and making a YouTube channel and all that sort of stuff. But I could definitely see that time that I spent getting to this level right here, because back when I started, I didn't things like Substance Painter and Designer weren't available to me, and Blender wasn't as good as it is now, and Unreal 5 is just about to come out and all sorts of stuff. I definitely think someone could sit down and make a scene like this. I mean, you can literally just follow the. You can also make a scene exactly like this by following the other interview that I did um, about this scene. But I think someone could sit down and make a scene like this in, in a few months of concentration. Like, there's a lot to learn for sure, but there is so much available on YouTube that I feel like someone could make this in a few months, because even things like the foliage were edited sheets that I didn't like 100% make, because things like Megascans did exist, so it was available for to be picked up. I did heavily edit them, and I had to make these plants actually myself. But I didn't. The texturing in some places, texture libraries, really helpful to make a big scene like this. And right now you've got access to like Megascans, so you can really jump in with some of the pre-made assets and arrange a scene like this, and then start learning all this. And it's just, yeah, it's super easy, super cool. So that was my end of year, and then we did a 10-week prototype. It was more like 13 weeks because of the maybe 12 weeks because we finished. We went home for a bit, and then I just sort of did some little things. Between a few of us, it was actually 5 artists that we worked on this. One guy did the blueprints and animations. I did these particle effects and the materials and shaders, and then some other guy did the he did some of the sculpting and the character, of course. Some of the, and then one person moved on to be sort of a producer for the project. Very cool. I mean, at this point, it's kind of getting, as much as I like this previous artwork that I made, at this point, it pretty much just is when I'm over the tipping point. So a lot of that is not as much of a journey past that point. It's kind of just like, oh yeah, I spent a long time making something new, because I had already learned how to do a lot of things at that point. So less to talk about here, but if you do watch these videos, a lot of these older ones, and these live streams, then you'll actually, you know, hopefully learn a lot, if you've gone this far into a video. But yeah, that's just kind of my journey into at least getting over the tipping point. And all in all, it took me, to get to that point I just showed. That was the end of university, which was 4 years, plus that extra 1 or 2 years, like I say. And yeah, if you're brand new to 3D, it's going to take you a while to wrap your head around a lot of things, but you could definitely boil that 4 years down. If you work a lot, you could boil it down to a lot less than what it was at the time. But I guess that's kind of how the world is right now, because Unreal 5 is going to come out, and all these people that are just finishing uni right now are going to be like, oh, everyone's going to be able to make what I made in like 2 seconds now. So things are getting faster, but that just means, again, accessibility is going to be a little bit easier. And that was my journey. I hope it was interesting. Yeah. So then we'll just have a look at some of my latest stuff. My favourite piece that I've made, if I go back to my ArtStation, would be the Merlin's Cavern, based on a concept in the challenge, the ArtStation challenge, and I started doing a lot of these development things, because once I pushed past the point of doing stuff for the scene that I needed to learn, there was always more things to learn as I went on. So I kind of, at this point, maybe my focus wasn't exactly learning Substance Designer or learning how to make some of these props, but certainly there was a lot in this scene to learn about lighting, and then also I made a video for it, so there was a ton to learn about in terms of camera work, as well as particles and stuff for this as well. And this is when ray tracing first came out in Unreal, so there was tons to learn there as well. So yeah, I just keep learning by doing some of these things, and I always try and pick just one new thing to add per project. It's kind of what I would say about that as well. Like, I could look through any of these and be like, oh yeah, well, there I wanted to learn just, different prop related things as well as substance. Over here I wanted to learn, lighting and more open spaces, and especially so from that challenge there to the latest challenge that I did, there was definitely a heavy focus on this one to make sure that it was a very large open space and not like the one that I've got here that is just enclosed, so yeah, that's just kind of my idea as I go through. And I've not uploaded anything for a while, but I've got some things in the works, so we'll just see where it goes. But that's me talking for more than long enough, so I will see you in the next one, and have a good one.